So who's the best centre back in hurling at the moment? We've been going through the different positions. Do you know what the funny thing is, Michael Verney? You'd actually struggle to name more than one centre back who's guaranteed full time in the Munster Championship. You've Declan Hannon. Obviously he's a brilliant centre back, and he's pretty much the first name that's going to be on the team sheet here when we're talking about them. But who actually plays centre back full time for Tip, Cork, Clare, Waterford? It's hard to actually say.
Yeah, it's nuts. Like we were saying, like Declan Hannon is nearly the only centre back in Munster. It's gas. No way you ever would have thought that. Like the most important position, Shawnee McMahon, Ger Hegarty, Kieran Carey. Like there's all the big number sixes down through the years. And yeah, it's funny. It just kind of I suppose it just shows you how hurling has changed so much down through the years. It was always the most important position. He stood on the 65, generally between the 65 and the 45. Now it's so fluid that you have to be able to play 5, 6 or 7. In Ronan Matter's case, you have to be able to play 3 and 6 or 3 and 5 or even 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 sometimes. So it's just mad. It is mad how it's changed, yeah.
But at the same time, you could see Declan Hannon playing wing back as well. That wouldn't be too much of a departure. I think most lads who can play centre back can play wing back also. But there are certain subtleties with it. Like generally when you're centre back, you are sitting back a little bit, especially if your team doesn't have a sweeper. You probably are the de facto sweeper. So at Tipperary, we know Ronan Maher can do it because he was brilliant there in 2016 winning the All-Ireland. We know Pádraig Maher can do it. We suspect Brendan Maher can do it. He was there for an awful lot of 2014 when Tip got to the All-Ireland. I know he was brilliant in the semi-final against Cork.
Brendan Maher can do anything. Nothing is impossible for Brendan Maher. He can do anything. When he can score a point with half a hurl, mark TJ Reid, mark Aaron Gillan and keep them quiet, he can do anything. So he can play anywhere.
Yeah, I think any of our regular viewers will know that you're just sewing it into me because he's from the same parish as me. And of course, I famously marked him in his first ever training session at senior level for Borris. But anyway, I don't know how you dragged that out of me. Right, so like Waterford, the problem is there's probably just a gap there at the moment. And when we did the sweeper section, we talked about Ty Burka. But for centre back, you'd actually struggle to name someone who's definitely going to nail that position down. Like Austin Gleeson was there in the league match against Tipperary during the 2020 league, got sent off, probably hasn't nailed down that position like you feel he could in the past couple of years. Dara Fives almost seems more, like if he can keep fit, seems more likely to do it. So there's no obvious man there, maybe even Kevin Moore. But this is the whole thing, and the same with Clare. Pat O'Connor might be there, Conor Cleary might go back out there. It's really hard to say, isn't it?
Some counties are spoiled for choice. The reason it's fluid in Tipperary is because they have so many lads that can play there. And they do.
That's the thing. Tipperary previously were so rigid that these guys play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then that was it. They never moved. Whereas that was the big thing for Tipperary last year. They finally realised, after getting pasted by Limerick in the Munster final, we need to actually pick horses for courses and allow lads to move around fluidly as the opposition dictates, or as you feel you need to do to give yourself the best possible platform.
So they have 2 to 3 options that can play centre back, which is great. Limerick have Dan Morrissey will slip in centre back if Declan Hannon is out, and probably Barry Nash will come in wing back. But you look at the other counties, and you're thinking Conor Cleary was centre back, looking like he's going to be a full back for Clare now. Pat O'Connor was corner back, wing back, looking like he's going to be a centre back now, which is he's been effective throughout the league, but it's an unusual rise. You know, usually you're a central man or you're not. Waterford, we don't know who's going to be there. Same with Cork. Mark Ellis was on the terrace last year for the first round Munster game. Then he starts centre back against Limerick the year after. So it's a tale of like 2 counties, Limerick and Tip, who have a wealth of options that can play in that position, and then 3 other counties in Munster of the top tier counties that are struggling to find one person to play there. And like we always talk about the platform across the half back line, while we don't know who's going to play there for Tip, we have a fair idea who's going to play there for Limerick. You've no idea on a given day who's going to play there for those 3 counties. And it like, in a way, I don't mean to sound bad, but in a way, like Pat O'Connor is one bad game away from being moved out of centre back completely. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the other teams, even if a lad has a bad game, if Hannon has a bad game, he's still going to be there the next day. And they're still going to go with him, you know?
Do you think there's certain qualities that are still required within a centre back? You know, you've mentioned Shawnee McMahon, Kieran Carey, these dominant centre backs of their era. Has it changed?
I think it has. I think you need a very clever, or like, I'm not saying that they weren't clever players, but like the puck outs aren't always going to come down on top of you anymore. So like you have to be like the center back now is a protector. If you're not playing a sweeper on your team, it's not a de facto sweeper, but they are pulling back in front of in front of the full back line. So that means you can't just throw a fella in centre back for a game and expect them to be unreal, because teams aren't just going to bombard ball down. So you have to build up communication lines with, like, Declan Hannon has to have one of his midfielders, usually Darrow Donovan or Will O'Donoghue, sitting back in front of him, almost marking his man, so that he can sit back and play that kind of quarterback role. So like I tried to play there a few times, and it's just, I'm a marker, so I'm not used to that. I want to mark my man, and I'm out around the middle of the field, and the ball's going over my head, and I'm at nothing. So there's an awful lot of, I think it has to be probably your smartest player. I'd actually, funny enough, say, I know you're not marking anyone when you're playing sweeper. I would say your centre back and your sweeper are nearly require the most hurling intelligence on the pitch.
Yeah, the use of the ball has to be great, especially if you're kind of either sitting back or you are that spare man. You're obviously outnumbered somewhere else on the field, so you need to be able to make an account double every time you get the ball, making sure that if you hand pass it, you're giving it to someone so that they're running into space and can pick out a man or come out yourself and be able to use the ball really wisely to set up a scoring chance. Having played centre back a couple of times, the funny thing about it is you can actually kind of delegate responsibility, and you can almost sort of decide that, well, I'm not marking that guy because I need to protect the space here, and if he goes out there and gets a score or two, that's everyone else's fault, not mine. So it's kind of funny that way, that you can almost hold your hands up and say, lads, that's everyone else's fault, not my own. I don't have to mark him.
You're a fair man to pass the buck. I'd say if you're playing centre forward and your man got a ball or put it over the bar, I'd say you'd nearly be looking around saying, why aren't you marking him? But it is true. It requires, that's why I said it's nearly one of your smartest players and your best communicators. Like, you're literally constantly talking, sit, come back, sit, I want you back in the pocket. So you need a really intelligent player in the head, but you also need a really intelligent player on the ball as well.
A dereliction of duty, I think, is what they call it. What about, like, you wanted to touch on Angus Clark with Westmeath. We saw him playing this year against Galway. Now, he got a red card, but it's pretty clear he's a really excellent player, nice left-hander.
Yeah, he's a lovely defender. Very, very good defender. Him and Tommy Doyle have been manning their defence for the last 5 or 6 years, and manning it very, very well. So, like, of the teams, like, down towards the bottom end of the top 10 counties, he's holding them together at the back. Him and Tommy Doyle would be, definitely. But, like, it's funny, what you don't have in Munster, you have a lot more kind of certainty in who's going to be playing in the various positions. Well, you had anyway. Like, your old McInerney was Galway centre back, obviously, when they won the All Ireland in 17. He struggled with that injury coming into the 18 final. And you just actually saw, funnily enough, you saw how much Galway struggled when he wasn't on his game in the final. And Kyle Hayes was pull him around. He definitely wasn't fit that day. Didn't start the semi-final replay. But you have Pádraig Walsh, who's after moving into the centre back position with Kilkenny as well. And then you have Ryan Mullaney with Laois, who was brilliant on their run last year. On the flip side then, you have Wexford, where it's quite fluid with Wexford as well. So they're playing 7 defenders. So Sean Murphy has played centre-back sometimes, but Matt O'Hanlon wears 6, but is often wing-back, and Paddy Foley could be centre-back. So they don't really have to mind too much, because they know there's someone behind, so they can all just mark their men, so they can follow their men wherever they go.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a man marker video at some stage, and I'd say Matt O'Hanlon will be in that, even though, like, he wears number 6, so that could be a bit deceptive, a bit like Michael Murphy in football. He always wears 14, but doesn't necessarily play full forward the whole time. Pádraig Walsh, yeah, definitely very interesting one at centre back, because he wouldn't necessarily be traditionally the size profile of a centre back, because he's quite diminutive, but he's some man to obviously climb up and catch a ball. But then if you go back to the Leinster final last year, and we've talked about before the way that Wexford basically designed their game plan around avoiding him, and it was very successful, because he was obviously they knew that Wexford were dropping an extra man back the field. It meant that Pádraig Walsh could be spare. He kind of sat back in front of the D, and basically Wexford played everywhere up the field except to where he was, and which meant they played in 100 yards of the field and were scoring from distance. And the other thing was, from the puck outs, Pádraig Walsh was able to stand back and attack it, but basically the whole Wexford forward line kind of folded in, so he had nowhere to go. He's just running straight into traffic. So it's a bit of a tough task for him there at the moment. And like, Paddy Deegan has gone in centre back at times too, but definitely very different to maybe the Brian Hogan era and even Kieran Joyce, when it was sort of a bigger, more of a brute of a man.
Yeah, it's a totally different game. What you say about his stature is interesting because you don't need to be 6'3" or 6'4" to play centre back anymore. If anything, as we were saying, I think you need to be mobile. You need to be good on the ball, good in the air, obviously, which he is as well. But you need to be able to. You need to be. You need to be smart. I'd say it's more kind of brain now than brawn. I would say in that kind of position when you're looking at as I said, the Shawnee McMahons, Ger Hegarty's, these kind of big barreling lads where the hardest thing was to try and get, like, if you're able to break through that line, you had a great chance. But with Pádraig Walsh, as you said, and it's funny, Boris Lee did the same tactic on Philip Mahoney in the Munster final, where they put every puck out down on top of him. So it totally negated. Pádraig Walsh likes to play that sweeper role as well, and we talked about him in the sweeper conversation. So that's one way of taking out the centre back. And invariably, if you play a team and the centre back doesn't play that well, chances are, or you've negated him, chances are you have a fair chance of winning the game.
In the Galway team, like Pádraig Mannion and Gearóid McInerney had swapped in and out between 5 and 6, I would say, at different times over the course of the last few years. And we already talked about Pádraig Mannion in the best wing backs discussion. So we'll stick with Gearóid McInerney here, even though Shane O'Neill has been using him full back. But there was kind of a sense that once Daithí Burke came back from Corofin duty and had his bit of a break, he was going to maybe slip back into the full back position, and then Gearóid McInerney would return to centre back. Is McInerney as dominant as he was a couple of years ago? Remember when he was lauded so much for the job he did on Austin Gleeson in the All-Ireland final?
Yeah, he did a man-marking job on Austin Gleeson in the All-Ireland final because Aidan Hart was sitting back. So it wasn't necessarily his normal role. Very interesting to see what Shane O'Neill does. He played Shane Cooney centre back in a couple of league games and did well. See, it's not somewhere. I have a funny one on this. I don't think centre back is somewhere you trial someone. Do you know what I mean? I think if you have a centre back, you have a centre back. So it's funny. Like, I was really interested to see, and we talked about it. Like, where will Daithí Burke go? Does that mean Gearóid McInerney will come back out, or will Daithí Burke be out the pitch? But it's a fair bit of jiggery pokery to be going on with your two, to me, your most important positions on the field, outside of the goalkeeper, are 3 and 6. McInerney was brilliant in 17 and struggled in 18. Definitely wasn't as dominant last year. Like, to many people's eyes, he should have been hurler of the year in 17. So whenever things pick up again, it is a big season for him. But again, I'm not sure where he's going to be playing. And I don't know if that's a good thing necessarily. I think in general, you should have a fair idea who your number 6 was. We talked about 3 of the Munster counties that don't know who their number 6 is or don't have a number 6. And we've seen their struggles in recent years.
And actually, I think you're right that about nearly being talked about as hurler of the year in 2017, McInerney, because I think every panellist on the Sunday game picked him, didn't they?
They did, and he didn't get nominated actually by the All-Star committee.
Yeah, of course, they've had us guessing for years. Now, how about picking your best one? Because I actually haven't made up my mind. As we're talking now, I'm still trying to decide. By the way, we haven't mentioned Sean Moore, my own Coola clubmate, and I'm not going to do the waxing lyrical, but he's obviously been pretty good over the last couple of years.
Yeah, he's a brilliant defender as well. Like, if you're talking about...
Wait, no, not defender, brilliant hurler. We don't have him doing too much defending, as he'd admit.
Well, that's true too, yeah. He's very, very good on the ball. Brilliant on the ball. Like, he's one of the most comfortable... he's a player. I was going to say defender. He's one of the most comfortable players on the ball that you see. And he's a funny kind of a style. He doesn't actually look that natural. But he's very natural when he actually strikes the ball. He doesn't look that natural sometimes on the ball. Very good free taker as well, and adds an awful lot. But again, he's usually kind of roaming. He sits back a lot of the time for Dublin as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, he would do.
He'll be the sweeper, and like that's what leads me. I think it's a no-brainer who we pick for centre back. When you go through the nuts and bolts of everything, if you're picking someone who's actually playing centre back. And to be honest with you, if I knew all the other teams and who was going to be centre back the whole time, it might be different. But Declan Hannon will be centre back for Limerick and is their linchpin at centre back. And I think you'll find it hard to make an argument for anybody else in that actual position that is playing the centre back position, not a sweeper, not a 7th defender, and will invariably be centre back most of the time. I think he's the choice for me anyway.
I tend to agree, but I would take you up on the point that, you know, where he's playing in the 6th position, whereas other counties have a 7th defender. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of the time Limerick have 12 defenders. So he's never necessarily playing in isolation. I do, in an overall sense, agree. I think it has to be Declan Hannon, but we should never get away from the point that Limerick play with 12 men back when they don't have the ball.
Yeah, well, listen, he kind of plays sweeper as well, kind of. So it's an amazing. Like, imagine we were talking about this 5 years ago, and we were saying this, that nearly every centre back is playing sweeper. Like, I play cornerback with the club sometimes, and the centre back, you're constantly pulling them back, and invariably the talk in the dressing room in most teams is like, where's our centre back going to be playing? Who's going to pick up the centre forward? So it's changed so much in the last couple of years, and I'm sure it's going to evolve again. But I just think of all of them, he's the best fit for what we're describing a centre back as.
Okay, we've both gone for Hannon, so send your comments in and let us know whether we're